The modern notion that art should enchant the world is a composite one, presupposing that, at least in practical terms, there is only one world to be spoken of, and that that world is inherently devoid of enchantment. It is up to the artist, to his creative imagination, as we call it, to enchant it, to inject the world with enchantment, even to conquer it with artistic genius, to tame it within the sphere of sublime experience, the enjoyment of the sublime. Art is to transform a dead world into a living one. In what sense is the world addressed here? Dead. It is dead insofar as it is to be understood in purely mechanistic terms. This is not to say that the world does not presuppose a hidden ground that eludes all of our measurements and calculations, but the early prophets of the modern world warn us against an older, even especially Christian, attempt to cultivate an intimate dialogue between the world of everyday life experience and its invisible ground. Modern man must learn to live in a mechanical world, the world of the autonomous reason, characteristic of the new science of Galileo Galilei, so as to best respond to his existential condition, and so too to the ground of the world as it appears to us, the empirical universe. Kant's enlightened man, the man of the present and of the future, though not of the pre-modern past, is a man who has learned to reason autonomously of any end or meaning given by God or nature, even though he is thereupon compelled to assume one such meaning or another to justify his own pursuits. What is enlightened man to pursue? Well, a rational, purely rational end, an end that is proper to and that may very well ultimately coincide with a purely rational society, a universal society, a society beyond master-slave conflicts, the realm of freedom, as Marx called it. Enlightened man must not pursue ends incompatible with that single human end in which man and nature are finally reconciled, given that nature can therein be seen as having found its fulfillment or redemption. In the final society, nature finds the solution, the final solution to the mechanical shackles with which men are born. Whether nature intends this solution on its own or not is hardly significant. What is of capital importance is that nature empowers man to gain consciousness of the solution, and so of the possibility of man's using his shackles, our physical mechanisms, to establish a world in which we are all somehow free from them, from the shackles. The mechanisms are to be converted into a system in which they foster freedom, integrated into the rise of a liberal regime in which machines shall set us free. In short, nature's mechanisms are no longer an obstacle, but an asset for freedom. Now, The modern abstraction of natural mechanisms out of nature as a whole is reminiscent of a certain Gnostic conception of physical life as ineluctably evil. The Gnostic vision of evil as ontologically autonomous from the good serves as stepping stone for the modern framing of one sphere of nature as cut off from nature as a whole, so as to fall under the sway of human autonomous reason, or the power that man can gather on his own to establish a world in which he is master of his destiny. Modern man must then, first of all, posit for himself a mechanical world reminiscent of old Gnosticism's world of evil matter. But now, the material world is no longer at war with a cosmic good. Rather, it serves to fuel the rise of a new good, the new universal society, in which a new enlightened man is king. In the new global society, the enlightened man dominates over all other men, men who are still tied to old ways, and so to our purported state of nature. The man who has converted mechanical, dead nature into a new life form is to rule over savages, or people still seeking redemption in a nature unmediated by our mechanistic sciences. Modern man is then the enemy of all mysticism, except for the symbolic one inherent in modern yearnings for infinite progress. Old mysticism must be just as savage as uneducated brutes living in abject conditions. In fact, the old mystic is likely to be preeminently pernicious insofar as he may inspire savages to reject the modern enlightenment, seeking refuge in otherworldly pursuits, or in the quest for a nature transcending the parameters of the modern transformation of mechanical nature, a transformation that presupposes that whatever is not mechanical in nature serves as fuel for the mechanistic science of modernity, our own mechanistic sciences. The notion that there is something really, not symbolically, eternal and permanent in nature, something that transcends altogether modern man's enlightened pursuits. Well, this notion becomes blasphemous. The notion that nature as a whole does not empower us, having rather something to say to us that may very well bring us to question the modern enlightenment at its core, well, that notion is anathema. The pure intelligibility of being itself is out of the window, replaced by what? Well, in the loftiest hallways of modern conceptualization, it's replaced by a conceptual framework, a supreme logic, that is originally as empty as medieval nominalism's universals are. But that, in the course of history, well, it acquires substance or content on the way to realizing itself at the end of its evolutionary process. Artistic enchantment will be one with the rise and consolidation of the realm of freedom, crowning it with delightful auras, singing joyous hymns to its glory, as to the triumph of enlightened man's will. Enchantment will be called for, most notably to decorate the new man in whom mechanistic nature has been transformed, complements of its hidden or noumenal ground, to speak with Kant. The new man, in whom nature's mechanisms are integrated freely, is a new machine that is more spiritual, more alive, and ultimately more real than pre-modern man. Indeed, the new man will ultimately be the consummation of nature as a whole, of both mechanical nature and its primordial ground. The new man will no longer wait for some extrinsic artist to enchant his world, for he will be the world collectively, and he will enchant himself as a collectivity, a universal chorus in which radical diversity is terminally univocal.